So I'm here with Matt Scannell of Vertical Horizon. Thank you very much for joining me. Of course, you've got the 25th anniversary re-release of that platinum selling album, Everything You Want, coming out on
Yeah.
the 2nd of August. So with that in mind, I kind of wanted to have a little bit of a look back at how things all began. Before the platinum selling album, everybody starts
Yes.
somewhere, right? So,
Yes.
what was that thing for you growing up that made you go, you know what, I want to be a musician? Did you have kind of a moment?
I, you know, I, I don't know that I ever really dared to dream that it might happen, but I do know that I was pig-headed and stubborn enough to just keep bashing my head against the wall until, and my bandmates were as well, until we started making some progress. When I was growing up, I had a guitar and I was obsessed with it. But there are a lot of people who are obsessed with an instrument and don't necessarily turn it into a vocation. So I'm not exactly sure, but I do know I was obsessed, completely obsessed. And I didn't necessarily have a really solid plan B, which I think stood me in good stead.
No, I agree. I think when you've got that kind of hunger, I'm gonna put all my eggs in this basket and go for it. Um, Obviously that kind of real breakthrough moment didn't come until many years later. Of course, you'd been kind of with doing this thing for like 7 years
Yes.
before you got that kind of first radio hit, which of course was the single "Everything You Want." Can you recall kind of how that song came about? Because obviously that was kind of the one that pushed you up to a whole new level.
Yeah. Yeah, my songwriting up until that point, we started the band in 91.
Mm.
And my songwriting just was okay, but it wasn't at the level probably that it needed to be maybe achieving some success. So as far as the group of songs around Everything You Want, I had worked really, really hard to try to raise my game, try to get better, try to become a better singer. Um, and I remember Everything You Want kind of came to me in more or less in a dream at about 4 o'clock in
Mm.
the morning. I was living in Chelsea in New York City, and it started coming to me. And sometimes that's what happens with inspiration. You almost just have to try to hang on and just scribble down and record as fast as you possibly can. And I did when I call the mantra, the when that bit came to me, I actually did roll over and go back to sleep. I was like, I'm
Mm.
tired. This is not convenient. And but then, by let's say 30 minutes later, I had gotten down of that, a majority of the song. And it was I think probably it was because maybe similar to an athlete, if you're training, then you just are functioning at a fairly high level, and plausibly that's sort of why that song came to me a little bit more easily than others. Others are just a slog, and you have to, like, just keep beating it up into submission. But that one was pretty graceful and elegant, and obviously it changed everything. I mean, it's
Mm.
essentially why we're talking now, right?
Mm. I mean, what was that moment for you like? I mean, obviously it was a while coming. What was that? Did you have kind of this realization of, like this has changed everything now?
Yeah. I mean, it had been a series of sort of ups and downs, very much a roller coaster, the journey up until that point. And then once Everything You Want started to connect, it was like getting, fired out of a cannon or something in the circus. You're like, we've got, liftoff, and that was wonderful. But the other thing too that's really worth mentioning is for the first sort of time in our careers, so we started in 91. This is around 99 that things started to really take off. It was the first time that we really had a team of people who were pulling
Mm.
for us, and world class people who were incredibly talented and incredibly good at their jobs, and their jobs were effectively helping bands, spread the word about their music. So it was almost like we could focus more on a slightly narrow skill set or job set, and we had these people who were sort of helping us with their incredible abilities. So it was incredible on effectively every level, right? Because we went from being this small sort of cottage industry band, this little like the little engine that could maybe,
Mm.
and and then all of a sudden, we had these amazing people just sort of lifting us up on their shoulders and kind of going, we got this. And but I think ultimately, yeah, it doesn't happen probably without a song that is resonating and connecting, and Everything You Want certainly did that. And it was surreal. I think, the best analogy I've heard from some of my friends. I'm not a surfer, but some of my friends are, and they say, yeah, it was you caught the wave. You caught the
Mm.
wave, and we were on the wave, and inevitably you're going to get off the wave, and that's okay. You know what I mean? But we were on it, and we rode it as far as we could, and it was, uh, you know, I get chills even now talking
Mm.
about it because it was such a momentous sort of feeling, and after all that time, and I personally had, you know, I was sort of starting to give myself like, okay, I'll give myself another month, and then I gotta quit, and I gotta get a real job,
Mm.
and it was down to that kind of jeopardy, right? Buying pasta on sale at D'Agostino's supermarket in New York City on Wednesdays, and that was the meals for the week. It was that kind of thing, and then all of a sudden to have this thing connect, first in some little markets around the states, but then and then sort of blossoming out into this song that is now known in to some degree, at least all over the world.
Mm.
It's great. I mean, I love it. And the other thing I have to mention is I'm so grateful that I love it because
Mm.
artists that I know sort of either don't really like or resent their hit songs or hit song, and plausibly because maybe they didn't write it or they had felt pressured by the record company to act a certain way, be a certain way. And RCA just said, hey, just go write songs that you love. In fact, I had written that song before we signed with them. So it was written with the purest of intentions. And as a result, now 25 years later, I get to sing that song with just nothing but affection and love for it, and I'm really grateful for that. Really grateful for that.
Mm. Of course, it didn't stop there. The third single off the album, "You're a God," would obviously go on to feature in the movie Bruce Almighty, starring Jim
Yeah,
Carrey. I mean, it turns out like that was kind of my introduction to you guys. Watching up, well,
oh,
growing
great.
growing up, I'd watched that movie, and then I had this realization a while ago. I was like, hang on a minute, I recognize this song. I know, I know this.
Nice.
So
Nice.
how did that happen? I mean, it was in a key point of the movie as well, so it
Right.
has this proper feature.
Yeah.
Um,
So I'll tell you, when I went I went to see that film in the theater, and I was just sitting there, and as the scene started, I was like, wow, this is like they're really playing this song. I mean, they're
mm,
like going for it. I mean, it's a long placement in that movie.
mm,
I think it just was the right song at the right time.
mm,
It was a song probably started with God in the title, right? So I imagine music supervisors were just scrolling through, titles to see what could possibly fit for the movie. And then, maybe the lyrical message was tangentially sort of, you know, plausible as far as what they were doing in that moment. And I actually, honestly, I don't really know that much about how it would have been selected, but I
mm,
do remember getting the call and thinking, because we had gotten we had gotten a few calls like, hey, this play, this theater company in Albuquerque wants to, sing everything you want with the sixth grade play at the end of the night. They'd like to, can we license everything you want to them? Sure. Okay, great. And then, you're a god, like maybe similar, like the volleyball team at Lawrence High School in Lexington, Kentucky wants that to be their theme song. Can they license it? Sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then Bruce, Jim Carrey's in a film called Bruce Almighty. They'd like to
Mm.
license Your God. We're all like, what? Is
Yeah.
it what? And I still get, it's great. I still get little checks like Bruce Almighty. I'm like, yes.
Yeah.
Every now and again, you're in a hotel room at night. You turn on the TV, and there's that scene. It's
Mm.
great, man. It's great.
Mm. Um, Obviously, we're looking back on that album. Is there a personal favorite for you that is kind of that maybe you look forward to playing in a set, one that you still kind of have that feeling for?
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, everything you want. I mean, truly, it completely changed my life, right? So
Mm.
so so every time, and we generally play that song late in the set. Every time we start that song with the mantra bit, um, I get fired up. I'm grateful for it. So obviously, the songs that were singles moved the needle for me in
Mm.
significant ways in terms of the way I've been able to live my life subsequent to that. But there's a song on the record called "Give You Back," and it's just this kind of soft, quiet, kind of somber, more atmospheric song.
Mm.
And as we were making the record, I had this real affinity for it. But as the record sort of continued to be built, I was waiting for the powers that be to kind of be like, so that song "Give You Back," we'd like to maybe
Mm.
we're going to take that off, and can you put something a little more peppy in there? I was waiting for the peppy call, and the call never came. Like "Give You Back" stayed on the record, and I always sort of thought to myself, well, if we can, if "Give You Back" stays on the record, then we're doing something right, because it clearly means that we've got, we're satisfying the needs of the people who are really putting, their efforts into trying to make this record happen, and they're not trying to meddle. There was
Mm.
no meddling. It was just like, yeah, we love these songs and we love this band, and let's go. And the other thing I'd mention is "Best I Ever Had," which is a ballad on the record, which actually turned into later a hit at country radio here in the States for an artist named
Mm.
Gary Allen. Um, that song I've always sort of said is probably better than "I Am." When that song was coming together, I had multiple moments where I was like, "Am I stealing this from somebody? Like, is this a Radiohead song?" And because the melodies, I think they're, and not to, I don't know. I try to just speak objectively about it,
Mm.
because it's not a very. I don't feel like, oh, I did that. I feel sort of like that song came to me, and I sort of just helped bring it into the light. That's all I did. And so "Best I Ever Had," I think, is a really, really nice song. Um, I think it's a beautiful song, and I'm proud of it. Right. So I'm also just grateful for that one. So those are two songs that I don't know. I love the record, but those are two that kind of go, wow, we did something special.
Mm. One that, when I was going back and kind of refreshing on the album, I was looking through things and I saw in the comments, particularly with the final track, Shattered, I
Oh,
felt that
Shackle. Yeah.
Shackle, sorry. Um,
Mhm.
I felt that, it kind of it had a different flavor to the rest of the album. And I was seeing these comments of people saying, this is the underrated one on this record. I really love this one. This one's really
Yeah.
underrated. How did that kind of happen? Because it feels like a different flavor kind of to close the album.
Well, and I think that's a very astute observation. It certainly is. So that is my bandmate Keith Kane singing lead vocal. He's
Mm.
got an incredible, harmonically rich, kind of gravelly voice. He's got this sort of one of a kind voice that I just adore. And that's his song. He wrote that song.
Mm.
But there also is something kind of nice about that. I think the band's performance on that song. So I, at the time, was extremely controlling. I am less so now. But at the time, we would track. Basically, the band would play to make sure that we had a drum track. We were at Bearsville Studios, which was owned by Todd Rundgren. And we were in Woodstock, New York when we were recording. And so we would all be there in the room and kind of rocking out, but the focus would be how was the drum track? And then we can kind of fix everything else, re-record all
Mm.
the other bits, the bass, the guitar, et cetera, et cetera. Excuse me. And so as soon as we got the drum track, our producer Ben was like, I think the whole thing's pretty good. And I was like, yeah, no, well that's precious that you think that's good, but we're gonna need to redo everything. And he was like, I don't think you need to redo anything. Forgive me if you can hear the noise out there.
That's all right.
Um, he was like, I don't think you need to redo anything. And it was such a sort of, I had to just sort of stop my obsessiveness, sit down in front of the console with a bit of a grimace and grumpy pants. I was like, no, all right, I'll listen to it. And I listened to it and I thought, well, that's really good. That's really good. There's no need to change anything. So, that song is essentially what they call live on the floor. It's just the band playing. And then I think Keith rather cut his lead vocal afterwards because you can sing everything, do everything at once. We weren't doing it that way, but we kept the guitars and the bass and the drums, and then did like a few touch ups, but not many. Let's say it's 99% live on the
Mm.
floor. So you're probably catching a couple things there astutely. So the lead vocal is sung by a different guy with a really incredible harmonically rich song. It's a different songwriter, and it's a different way of performing.
Mm.
Um, to basically to all the other songs on the record, where I was more like, let's get in there and do everything a million times.
Something that really surprised me and struck me when I was looking through your catalog. Of course, you actually got to work with Neil Peart later on in your career. I mean,
Yes.
that I haven't seen him collaborate with a lot of people. Um, how did that happen? And I imagine, that must have been such an incredible experience to have such an amazing musician.
Yeah. So Rush is my favorite band.
Mm.
Neil Peart was my favorite drummer. Neil Peart is my favorite lyricist, right? So I was obsessed with Rush growing up, and really continue to be. Although, truthfully, I find it hard now to listen to their music. It makes me sad. It makes me miss him. And I know that at some point that'll,
Mm.
maybe that'll change a little bit. But for now, it's harder for me to listen to their music. So, but I met Neil in this crazy, crazy sort of weird confluence of events. But my girlfriend was best friends with a guy who owned a car dealership in Texas,
Right.
and he was selling Neil a car, and Neil was selling him a car. And he said, "Hey, can you go over to this guy's house, take pictures of his car, because I'd like to try to even get it sold before it gets here, so that I can just keep this thing going." So we went over there, and as I'm trying to steel myself, like, what am I going to say? I don't know. What do you say to Neil Peart? He sort of, comes through the door, and I'm looking up at him. He's looking down at me, and as I'm just kind of flummoxed and quiet, because he was not into people fawning over him. It
Mm.
was just not. He was uncomfortable in those types of situations. He just wanted to be one of the guys, which is hilarious to say because he's Neil freaking Peart. But at the same time now, over the years and he became like my big brother.
Mm.
And uh, he he reached down to me and he said, "I'm a big fan of your work,"
Wow.
which was just like, and so over the years we just became closer and closer and closer, and eventually, I think what happened. So we were working on a record called "Burning the Days," and Neil had been writing a book, and he was putting a poem, a set of lyrics, sort of, or a poem, whatever. I don't think they ever became a song, so let's call it a poem at the beginning of one of his books. And as I was reading it down, oh man, it was such a moment. As I was reading it down, I thought to myself, well, there's one line that, like, I like it. Of course, I like it because he's a great writer, but I
Mm.
almost feel like I almost feel like he might be able to. I think of it when I'm in collaborative writing situations. I always think of it as, let's try to beat this. We've got a good thing. Let's try to beat it. Let's see if we can just go up a little bit higher. And in the moment when he asked me what I thought, I sort of had this. I had a choice to make. Either I was going to be sort of sycophantic and tell him that everything he's ever done is great, and he's the greatest, and this is great, and wow, aren't you great? And I can't believe how great you are. All of which is true, but he also, like, was asking me, as someone who had maybe had his 10,000 hours in this world of songwriting and lyrics and stuff, what I thought of it. And I needed
Mm.
to, I felt, be honest with him and say, okay, I think it's beautiful, it's moving, I love it. But there's this one line that I think you could possibly beat. And what if you just took a look at that and had a think? That's it. And he was so grateful. It was beautiful. And he was so grateful. He said,
Mm.
"Oh yeah, that's a great idea. Let me think on that." Yeah, and he did wind up doing it, which is just awesome. But
Wow.
later that night, he said to me, "Hey, we should write a song together." And I feel like that was the moment for him. That was, hey, I'm going to be able to get into a room with this guy, and we can really maybe collaborate. We can maybe build something together. So we wrote a song called "Even Now," on "Burning the Days," and it was so great when he came into my studio. you know, I was expecting, like, we'll sit down. Hey, how you feeling? Oh, I'm feeling okay. But whatever. You're like, oh, I feel kind of edgy. Okay, edgy. Let's write down the word edgy and see if we can put that in the song, right? So we sit down, and Neil sort of pulls out this folder with this heavy stock, like printed, with borders. I remember there were borders, and there were different fonts and like indentations, and he's like, here's some lyrics, take a look at those. And it
Wow.
was it was Even Now. I mean, it was all the way down, perfect. And I just picked up an acoustic guitar and I started playing, and I started singing the lyrics, and I was recording it, thank goodness. But I sang the song down effectively, in more or less in one take, instantly. And it was just so moving to me that I just, again, like I say, when the
Mm.
inspiration hits, sometimes it's less about what you're doing and more just about reacting and staying open and letting it flow through you. And that song just flowed forth from me. And when I was done with that moment, and sure, we had to make some corrections, and we built it up a little bit, obviously. But he said, "Is that something that you had? That just sort of fit those lyrics?" And I was like, "No, not it wasn't at all. It was just a moment." And so when we were done writing the song, I said, I sort of steeled myself because yes, infamously, he really didn't work on a lot of other projects.
Mm.
I said, "Neil, would you consider playing drums on Even Now?" And again, he's a huge guy, big deep voice. He's like, "Well, no one else can play drums on this song." And
Right.
uh, and I was like, "Oh gosh, that's so great." And then eventually, we got Capitol Studio A, I think it was, and yeah, over at Capitol Studios, and did the whole thing. And I remember saying, "Well, Neil, you're going to nail this song in like 20 minutes. If we've got more time, would you consider playing on another song or two?" And he said, "Yeah, send me the songs, let me hear them." And so he wound up playing on two other songs on that record. And then he played on two songs on our subsequent record
Mm,
on Echoes from the Underground, and it was a tremendous experience for me. So beautiful. It's really really bittersweet because
mm,
the void that he has left in my life is deep and dark. And I try to just think about him and smile and be grateful for having known him. But when you have a friendship like that, and friends like that don't come along very often, if ever. And
mm,
so it's tough. It's tough. It's tough. But it was a really really incredible experience, and he is the best. Period.
mm. I imagine, moving forward in your career, that kind of had an impact on maybe your process. Did it kind of change? Because obviously there's that footage on Instagram of you being actually in the room while he's playing. Did that kind of alter
Yeah.
how you look at making an album?
Well, that was his request. He
Mm.
said, he was like, "Can you come in there and be there with me?" I remember I mistakenly read some of the comments on YouTube over that video, and you see these people just reacting with vitriol. Who the hell's that bald guy? And what does he think he's doing? Conducting Neil Peart, the greatest drummer of all time. And I'm like, I know. He asked me to do it. Because that's how they had worked on. I think it was Snakes and Arrows with Booge, with Nick Raskulinecz, their producer.
Mm,
Nick was in there in the room with him, and Neil loved it because so much of the time when he was tracking, he'd just be tracking by himself, and when someone else was in there, like an Energizer Bunny, just excited, it made him more excited. Um, yeah, it did. It did change. It did change well. Let's put it this way. It just changed. He just changed everything in my life. I mean,
mm,
I went from him being someone I admired and in my sort of a musical hero in my favorite band, to him being like my big brother. I mean, and then we would talk about everything. I would show him lyrics. He'd tell me what he thought about them, and I play him songs, and he'd make suggestions. And yeah, amazing. And the other person I have to mention, just because it's a similar relationship, and thank goodness he's still around, is Richard Marx.
mm,
Richard Marx is like a big brother to me, and just as like an Olympic athlete of a songwriter and singer, and he's another guy who's just taught me so much about the process and made me want to raise my game. I just whenever I get to write with Richard, whenever I had the opportunity to do something that was work related with Neil, you're not going to go in there and half-ass it. You're
mm,
gonna bring everything to the table, and I love that. I mean, I've always been someone who's inspired and aspired to be better, to do better. But when you have examples like that in your life of people who have done it and still want to do better, it's really, really energizing and exciting. So,
mm,
yeah, I've been fortunate to have some really good friends.
mm. Um, a question I like to finish on that I ask every guest that comes on. It's a bit of a hypothetical one.
Okay.
Um, if you could tour with any band, one from the past and one from the present, who would they be?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, so I'd have to say Rush. I would. I mean, if you're telling me I could tour with Rush,
Mm.
I'm there all day, every day, any day, and that is a band from the past.
Mm.
Um, but as far as I know, um, but yeah, that would have to be it. From the present, I would want to tour with Peter Gabriel.
Mm.
I would want to tour with Peter Gabriel. I would just be sitting there every single night just drinking every single second of that show in, hearing these. If I could have in-ear monitors, like have his mix and listen to him singing in my brain. Oh my gosh. I just love Peter Gabriel. So those would be, I don't know. I could play this game all day long, but those two come to mind quickly.
No. I think they're great choices. I mean, I think from the outside looking in, maybe there might be a couple of people that might be surprised that you've gone with kind of more, progressive, more kind of, I don't know what you class them as, kind of more, I don't know, in depth kind of people that would really go for that. I think it's quite interesting. Has that kind of always been a thing for you? Lyrically, that those are two kind of real deep intellectual kind of people. That do you look
Right.
at that as kind of inspiration
Yeah.
for your material?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So Peter Gabriel is one of my absolute favorite artists, always has been. Um, when I got the So record, my mind just was completely blown, and then I went back, and then I stayed with him and went forward. And but yeah, guys like that guy. Well, I mean, another band that I adore, and now that you're mentioning kind of these
Mm.
deeper lyricists is Elbow. Like, I
Mm.
love Elbow. Gosh, I love Elbow. Put me on the road with Elbow, man. Um, but it's a similar thing. The poetry of the lyrics, the incredible, vocals, yeah, there's a depth there. And obviously Rush is very nuanced and complicated
Mm.
music. My band doesn't necessarily do that, but we do have a real appreciation for being able to play your instrument at a high level, and that's a very important thing to us. So that is maybe one of like the prog sort of ethos
Mm.
coming through. Hey, you got to be good at your instrument. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I do. I love a simple, I love a simple pop song. Sure, great.
Mm.
Let's just go have some candy. But probably the songs that kind of really carry through for me through my life are songs like "Don't Give Up" off of So. I mean, just what the heck? Just you got to be kidding me, Peter. Mr. Gabriel. I'm sorry, we're not on first name terms.
No, it's well, thank you very much for joining me. Of course, for
My
those
pleasure,
out there that
Ryan.
want to pre-order that 25th anniversary copy of Everything You Want, you can via the link in the description below. And I also noticed that there are some signed copies available as well, aren't
Yes, I've practiced my signature, and I'm feeling fairly confident that I can deliver. Ryan, I have to say I'm so grateful to you for taking the time, and also,
they?
since you're UK based, I just mention really quick, we would love, and I know your stuff goes out all over the world, but we would love to. We get asked about the UK all the
Mm.
time. Why don't you play in the UK? Why don't you play in the UK? Why don't you play in the UK? And we went over there years and years and years ago, and we've always wanted to go back, and we just haven't been sort of invited in those circles, invited to come
Mm.
and play. So it's not us, it's you. No, no, we would really love to come back and play. Whether it's just me playing an acoustic set
Mm.
in a pub somewhere, or if it's us doing a real thing. We would absolutely love to. So if any of your listeners are people who know about how to get the band Vertical Horizon back over to the UK, we would jump at the chance. So I just wanted to put that
No,
on record.
absolutely. I mean, that's the open call out there. I know we have some people that are in that kind of sphere, so
Yeah.
we'll try. I think
Yeah.
we've got to do it, right? So
Well, we got to use our words, Ryan. You know what I
yeah,
mean? You got to use your words. That's it. That's all. No, but thank you for your time,
I'll have
man.
some talks. We'll see what we can do.
Sweet.
Well, thank you very much, but
My
it's been
pleasure,
really
Ryan.
cool.